a filmmaker.
Yes.
Yes. And you're the CEO of Real Beauty and Real Women, right?
Yep. And Pick It Up Pictures.
And the founder of the
NIMBY project.
NIMBY project.
Yeah.
Not in my backyard project. Steve, lead this for me. And
well, Jacquelyn and I have been working together for years. You know, she's going to speak more about the journey and the mission that she's been on. But long story short, along with Neil, she's been talking about this issue before it was fashionable, before others would even listen to what she was saying. She was in the forefront, and now she's done a wonderful film, an incredible piece, as well as the work she's doing. She's going to speak a little bit more about that. But we had to have her on today. Good morning. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Coach.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate being on the show and being able to talk about the mission. I started Not in My Backyard 14 years ago, pre-9/11, when America, the economy was really well, and people really didn't want to talk about women and children. But 50% of homeless people are women and children fleeing abuse. And every 12 seconds, a woman is beaten in America. So I really wanted to show how women and children that were abused lived in America. So I went to shelters across America to film women and children living in shelters who wanted to break the cycle of violence. And from there, just going to all these different shelters, over 4 children are murdered a day due to abuse. And it's really a big issue and epidemic that has been happening in America.
Oh, wait a minute. Time out. Hold it. Time out.
Sure.
What did you say?
Over 4 children are murdered a day due to abuse and neglect in America.
Wow.
Every 12 seconds, a woman is abused. That's incredible.
Every 12 seconds, a woman is abused, but every 4 children die every day in the country as a result, in this country, America.
Yes.
Yes, in America.
Wow.
That's why the human rights issue now.
Yes.
Wow.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I couldn't get past that for a second.
The statistics are so startling, and that's why I did make the film 14 years ago. But at the time, people really didn't want to talk about abuse in America and abuse in our backyard. Now with the NFL, it's really brought to light big issues, but it's still not bringing up the solutions of breaking the cycle of violence and abuse in America. And really where that starts from is our lawmakers. We're asking the NFL to be an example and leader, to have a zero policy for violence against women and children, but yet it's a misdemeanor in America to beat your wife, and so is making graffiti. So you can't really ask a sports organization to really be the forefront and the leaders of this issue when our own laws are saying we don't really value women and children. It's okay to beat your daughter.
Would you think that to stretch your imagination, and you have the research and you have the figures, do you think that one of the reasons that state legislators across the country don't want to get involved because they're involved?
Yeah, absolutely, because it is an epidemic.
There may be a state senator or a state senator that's whipping his wife and children up.
Absolutely. And it's a big issue. Most people don't know when it comes to family abuse, whether it's child abuse or you're battering your spouse. You don't go to criminal court. You go to family court because it's considered a family issue. And the laws are a lot different. You can plead no contest. And it really is such a deterrent for domestic violence victims to pick up the phone and call 911, because child services can come right involved and take your children because they're watching you be abused. There's so many dynamics with abuse in America and just how rampant it is through our country that the laws are so outdated from 1950 that if they don't change, more women and children will die. More women are murdered every day.
That's why we involve
these laws. I love that she just said that. I wasn't even aware of that. Are so outdated, and it's so man friendly, if you will. Now that makes sense. Why a lot of young ladies don't want to call Because first the spotlight is on me with ACS, so now you're gonna come take my kids. I'm looking like I could have got out of that some kind of way.
Could I handle
Then all of
it?
a sudden he's going to family court and he's gonna come right back.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I know one thing for sure, that in New York City, for example, they changed it somewhat.
Yes.
And you'll correct me if I'm
Yes,
wrong.
they
That just the accusation, when you tell a police officer after you die, just the accusation is enough to get him or her arrested. Now there was a time they changed it.
No.
What is it?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, fix it.
You can't arrest someone on an accusation for anything.
They have to see
and
bruises.
I actually do agree with that, because some people would just call it and say that. You can't arrest anyone on an accusation. What New York has is a domestic violence program where their police officers are more educated in domestic violence situations, because cops get killed going on domestic violence calls.
Yes, that's true. That's one of the most dangerous calls to go on, domestic violence call.
So New York really feels that it's important for their cops to be educated, which is wonderful. But with that being said, it is still a misdemeanor to beat your wife in America. And you can still go to court and plead no contest. And no contest means, I'm not admitting that I hit my wife, but I'm not saying that I didn't.
Right.
So the next time we get this phone call and there's proof that my wife is beaten up, I will get charged. But then again, you still are only getting charged for a misdemeanor, and that just sends a horrible message to women, because once their husband does get out of jail or pleads no
coming back.
She's going to get more of a beating than she ever has. And what people don't realize is that when women leave their husbands, they're at a 90% higher risk of getting murdered.
Brother Barry, jump in now.
I would definitely say they aren't alone. However, when your laws do not protect you, over 4 women are murdered a day due to domestic violence.
Right.
So I think with those kind of staggering numbers, I mean, it's over $3 billion annually in hospital and medical bills because of domestic violence. Those are huge numbers. And I think what those numbers still say compared to what our laws are is that women and children aren't protected. And that's why I went underground into these shelters, to show women and children that are fleeing abuse and seeking refuge.
Well, let's talk about the shelters. The shelters themselves. There's not enough shelters in here.
Did you
there
find
are
that,
no
Jack?
housing
Really?
for shelters in the United States
For women that are going through domestic violence.
They're lumped in together with the general.
I was going to say
shelters.
that. In other words, I need everybody goes to the path right over here. They got to go to path first over here by Yankee Stadium.
Wow.
Regardless of the scenario.
And families too. So that's just not going to.
Wow. Well, we said that earlier. This is not a problem that's going to be easily fixed. However, it's going to be fixed, and I'm so proud that now we have a team of learned professionals on this one.
Sure.
Just these two by themselves have a wealth of knowledge, not only just the knowledge, but are willing to roll their sleeves up and get busy.
Phones
and that's
are
what we
open.
want.
Of course.
Okay, right here on the 3G Experience, and we'll go back to Jacquelyn. You still there?
I am still here.
Good, okay. And, of course, we have Neil Berry in studio, and, of course, Coach Stephen Lynn is here as well. During the break, we were talking about the NFL, naturally, and your involvement with programs trying to stem the tide of violence in the NFL. Now, but before we go to the obvious, Ray Rice, of course, what about the things like the Adrian Peterson thing where he's beating children? How about that? What's your posture on that?
My take with Adrian Peterson is that he was abused when he was a child, and he really thinks it's okay to abuse his child. And that, again, stems with we really need to start talking about these solutions, because whipping your child is not okay. By any sense of any means, and he was a 4-year-old, and when Peterson came out, he said, "Well, that's how I was," and that's just a classic with abuse.
Yes.
It just goes from generation to generation to generation, and we really need to start breaking that cycle, and that really comes with a curriculum in schools. We really need to start getting into these schools and really talking to children about what abuse is, that you can't solve your problems through violence. My issue with these 16 women senators that wrote into Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, was that they said they would have a zero domestic violence policy, but yet they've been senators for a long time, and I do not know why they aren't writing to Congress and themselves and politicians who got into politics to be lawmakers to say we will have zero domestic violence and zero abuse tolerance in our country, in our backyard. And they're not saying that. And that issue lets men like Adrian Peterson and a lot of our society think it is okay to beat our women and children, because honestly, our laws and our media, that is all that is depicted. We live in a very violent, racist, homophobic country. And these are issues that if we do not start addressing these solutions, these dynamics of abuse will continue to change, which is why my company produces socially conscious entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
We want children and people to see, when they flip on the TV, shows that really discuss homelessness, abuse.
Right.
There's
Teaching
so many
them.
issues
Yes.
plaguing America, and if we put this on our media, whoever controls the media controls the mind, we can make a difference.
Yes, I agree with that.
How about the situation where we know that the scolding, disciplining children thing is a thing that crosses all ethnic boundaries. It crosses all economic boundaries as well. How do you define for parents when when is it ever appropriate to strike a child?
Well, I think
I know.
Circumstances call for certain reactions. Now, hitting your child, I have to say at this point, hitting them. And the question is, what do you mean by hitting them? Patting them on their buns, you understand? When they're little kids. I told you get away from that fire. I told you don't go out in that street. Some of those where they're life-threatening, where the child is not listening and it's life-threatening and they seem to have a hard head, you want to be a little bit more stern. You might want to grab them. There's things. But what Adrian did, remember, Adrian, and he's not the only one.
Oh, no,
somebody's doing it right now. Sad to say,
that.
that's a beating. You make them strip down, no clothes, and just beat them till the skin is showing to the white meat. You understand?
And what people don't realize is that way of beating started on plantations.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, we saw that.
This is what slave owners did to slaves. This is not a way to treat any human being.
Yes.
It's not acceptable. And I understand down south, because I'm actually in Texas right now doing some work. They told me this is normal. Well, you know what? It may have been normal back then, but it's really never been normal, and it's not acceptable.
So
I don't feel there is a thin line between discipline and punishment. I have a 13-month-old daughter, and I would never imagine doing what Adrian Peterson did to my child.
Mm-hmm.
It's unacceptable.
Yes.
Will I discipline my daughter? Absolutely. Will she know right from wrong? I really hope so. I want to instill that as a parent, and I will be strict. But there is a difference between being strict and beating your child.
Yes.
I mean, he had marks on his scrotum, and that's what I see on Facebook. Well, that happened to us. Well, maybe that's why our society is so violent.
Oh, no
Maybe
doubt about
that's
that. That's guaranteed.
More women and children are murdered every day because we think violence is a way to solve our problems, and it's not. And we also think as a society that we should be calling on the NFL, which is a violent sport and a sports organization, to lead the example on abuse against women and children or violence in any way.
Exactly.
But we're not saying to our lawmakers, these laws need to change. And we demand that change now.
I think one of the most poignant things.
The issue with that is the alternative isn't so good. So if you're a child and you go and you talk to your guidance counselor and you say, my parents smoke marijuana, and then CPS shows up at your house.
Yeah.
They take your 3 children and they split them up.
Mm-hmm.
They take 3 siblings, they put them in different homes, and a lot of those homes in Child Protective Services and foster care are getting more abused than where they were at home. So really, when we discuss all these situations, again, my issue is that if we don't discuss all these dynamics, we're not going to have a solution. Child Protective Services, I feel, in most states, is one of the worst things in the world.
Indeed.
They do not protect children, and they split up siblings, which I feel that you are re-battering these victims, where maybe what the student counselor should do is go and talk to the parents or send an expert over on the effects of smoking marijuana when you have children. I mean, there are so many different things that we can do. And I just think, the option of, well, we're going to pull you out of your home and put you in foster care is not always the best option for these children, especially when it is a failing system.
Jacquelyn, can I just chime in on that?
Appreciate that.
Jacquelyn, come in behind that, if you would. The training up, the Bible says, train up a child so that when he grows old, he will not depart from that. What's your take on the training of the children, the youngins, reaching them in middle school? How can that, from your perspective, change this horrible cycle that we're in?
I think that is so important, implementing so many different things and getting children young. Because a lot of times these young children, they're already adapting to what society tells them.
Right.
And so in their head, they're already seeing themselves as a perpetrator or a victim subconsciously, and they don't even know it because they're seeing what they learned from school, bullying, the media is huge. So I think it's really important. My documentary, Not in My Backyard, that screens in a lot of high schools and universities. When I made that film, I said, well, we're going to make this, and 100% of the profits are going to go towards domestic violence awareness and really keeping shelters across America up so that women and children had a place to go. And I think that it's so important. At this point, education at the youngest form on violence in America is crucial, I feel, to our survival, because our statistics and our facts are just showing how many people are getting murdered a day and beaten a day.
4 women a day.
It is really important.
4 women a day die.
For sure.
Yes. Yep. And 1 in 5 high school girls get abused in America. And those are just staggering numbers. And a lot of times these girls, they're not going to go home and tell their parents. So what a lot of these schools now are doing is they have domestic violence prevention and programs. I mean, October's Domestic Violence Month, so I really want Not in My Backyard, which you can watch on any of my websites for free, just across America to really screen in high schools, because there is such thing as battered women syndrome, where women feel like they can't leave. And there are so many dynamics and layers to that. But once you educate and heal people, they do become empowered, and you do break that cycle of violence. And the earlier you get them at, the earliest age you get them at, the better. So it's imperative, the work that Michael is doing.
Jacquelyn, where do we go from here? We've sat here and we've talked for the last hour. We've learned some fantastic information. We've vented, we've shared, we've planned. Where do we go from here?
I think there's a few really important things that we could do to solve, to be part of the solution. And one is what Michael's doing, definitely put curriculum and counseling in the programs at a young age. I think also the other biggest obstacle is really changing laws, because our laws just say that it's okay to beat women and children. And until our laws change, society is not going to change either with that. So I think that is another huge thing. I think that in the communities, there are organizations and shelters that are really trying to serve these communities and give voiceless victims a voice. But as demands keep rising in America, funding keeps on getting cut. So I think it's our job to really find these organizations and shelters that are truly making a difference and find a way to keep their doors open.
The first way I would see would be the church. The church should be the obvious stop along the way. But you see, the problem with the church is that there's folks sitting up in there every Sunday morning that Saturday night got their behind whipped. and there's no there's no outlook for them. Go to that. There's no outlook for them to reach out because they don't want to be embarrassed.
And remember earlier we talked about there's more than just the physical part of domestic violence.
Sure.
And that's extremely prevalent in the church.
Sure.
Particularly those purse strings. Huh? I'm the provider for this house. This is my house. This is mine. You could be out in the street in a minute. You see? And therefore, you don't really want to talk about it. So
yeah, there's economic abuse in America. There's economic abuse even for the women that work and make excellent money. What people don't realize is as soon as they come home, they have to give their husband their paycheck. It's all about power and control, so that they can never have their own independence if they wanted to keep their own bank accounts and leave. Most of these women, they could be CEOs of their own companies, but when they're at home, they take on such a different role so that when they do leave, they have to leave their job behind. They have to leave their home behind. They are literally running for their lives.
Yeah.